Hey, Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anna. Pleasure.
So I know that you started with spirituality and bringing spirituality into business, which I find fascinating because a lot of people don't necessarily see those two together, right?
Right.
So how did you get started into bringing spirituality into business?
Well, I have a very traditional management consulting background and speaking background. Some of my clients are Southern California Edison, Virgin Records, Sony Pictures. I spoke on vision at the Harvard Business School 4 times. So a very traditional background. And about 25, 30 years ago, I'd come back from speaking in Hong Kong at a joint meeting of the American and Canadian Chambers of Commerce. And I went into a funk, and I didn't know what the funk was about. And I ended up at an Augustinian monastery north of Toronto, and I had this thought pop into my mind. What was missing was God. And I went, that's it. Well, in those days, in the late 80s in Toronto, I mean, everybody said, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about it. And so I shut down because everybody said, don't talk about spirituality and work. I went to California that summer, and spoke to my friends there, all of whom said, spirituality and work, yes. And I said, no, I said spirituality and work. And they said, yeah, no, I heard you. You have no reaction to it? No. And that, Anna, was when the penny dropped, because I saw that my fear was your reaction were I to bring up the subject, spirituality and work. And once I saw that it was my fear that was driving me, I thought, no, I really want to talk about this. So I came back to Toronto and talked again to the same people, friends and colleagues and clients, again, all of whom said, you can't talk about spirituality and work. But I said, well, wait a minute. Number one, I have not defined what I mean by spirituality and work. Mm-hmm. And number two, I'm not asking you for anything. This is what I would like to explore. No, you can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. You'll lose your reputation. People will think you're proselytizing. I wasn't proselytizing. I was just interested in this field. And that's when one of the first major pennies in my life dropped in my mind. And I saw that the issue with people around spirituality and work is, you think that I'm going to come in with this definition of of spirituality and work that I'm going to impose on you, which was not in the least true for me. And yet everybody said that. Can't you use another phrase? Values in the workplace, honesty, integrity. No, because that's not what I wanted to talk about. And so what I discovered then was that people think of spirituality in the workplace as answer, that something's going to be imposed or proselytized upon them. And instead, what I wanted to do was evoke it. If you were interested in spirituality and work, I wanted to talk to you about it. And if you weren't, totally fine with me. And so once people saw that I wasn't about, having them to do it, then they opened up. And what I discovered, and it was a huge, hole in people's life. They wanted to talk about this in a way that was relevant. And so thus began the inquiry into not what is it for me, but more importantly, what is it for you? And how can you, if you choose, bring that into your workplace? And so that began this inquiry. I did help to set up a lot of conferences around the world. I helped set up a Center for Spirituality in Business at the Sony School of Business at St. Mary's University in Halifax, Canada, first of its kind in Canada, all designed to put this conversation safely out into the world. And I saw the real hunger for this. People cut off their heart and their soul when they go to work to a great extent. We can do spirituality at work and at places of worship, but we can't, at home and places of worship, but we can't do it in business. And so could we do it in a way that worked for you and the business? In the same way that Years ago, I couldn't talk to you. I'm gay, I'm black, I'm a woman, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug abuser. No, you can't talk about it, you can't talk about it. But we found ways to talk about all of those issues respectfully that were of benefit to the individual and the enterprise. And so I think spirituality in the workplace is in the same arena. And it's really coming in now very powerfully.
What did you see as some of the results as bringing spirituality into the workplace? Were people happier?
I would say that the major thing is that there was a part of themselves that they didn't know could be brought into work that now could be. So yes, they were happier. There was a calmness to it. There was an excitement, like, we can talk about this here at work. There was a resilience. There was I mean, they still had to do their work, clearly, but this was another part of their whole being that could come into the workplace. And as I look at work over the years, what I keep seeing is the expansion of more and more of the human being into the workplace. One of the major benefits, I think, was, I don't know, do you know the term discretionary energy?
No.
So let's say that you hire me to work for you, and my job description is I'm doing ABC, for which I get paid X amount of dollars a year. That's our agreement, and as long as I keep that and you keep that, I'm fine. We're fine. In addition, however, I have this discretionary energy that I can choose to bring into this workplace or not. You can't demand it. And so if this, place of work is a place where my spirit can flourish, then I want to bring this discretionary energy. So that was a huge benefit that we hadn't seen beginning.
What does spirituality mean to you? How would you define it?
You know, it's interesting. I don't have the definition, and purpose, because if I, in those days, if I defined it, I would lose, 3/4 to 7/8 of the audience, because generally people don't agree with just one little definition. It would be to bring more of your soul into work. Uh, I think that's what I'm seeing more as we get into our discussion about heaven on earth. One of the issues in society now is this longing to bring out more of the soul, generally. But so I would say it would have to do something with bringing more of your soul, your spirit, your divine essence, your divine presence, that to the fore. I've been watching recently America's Got Talent and Britain's Got Talent, and just, my wife thinks I'm nuts, but you see these little girls or these little boys come on, or there's even adults who are scared to death about being on that huge stage in front of Simon Cowell. And then they start singing or they do this act, and you go, oh my God. And you see this soul come out. And I think that's what the draw for me is for that show. You see, that show in essence gives permission for the soul to be expressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say some elements of expression, creativity, natural flow, which are so important to, I mean, so many things, but one is being able to ultimately give more, right? Which is some of what our purpose is to give more of ourselves. And you talk about that in Heaven on Earth. So Project Heaven on Earth is
Yeah.
very ambitious goal, but I think so many people are wondering around and wondering what their purpose is, right? But you ask a much bigger question, which is, what is humanity's purpose? And it's like,
Yeah.
gosh, I love it because it takes yourself out of the equation, because sometimes it can be so me focused, like, what am I here to do versus what are we here to do?
Yeah. There was a guy, and I forgot his name at the moment, but he, oh God, what's his name? Anyway, he wrote an incredible paper years ago in which he asked the question, what is the common purpose of humanity? And I remember I read the paper, but just the title alone was phenomenal for me, phenomenal. I just, to hear Well, first of all, because you have to assume that humanity is present, which he did. And then the next question is, for what? And that was part of my initial thinking about heaven on earth. Because I think the important thing here we should do is just do the bridge as well. So I did all this work in spirituality and work. I was going to do a keynote address on the topic at a conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And just before I went on, I was meditating, and the thought popped into my mind, if every business in the world is spiritual, is that what you want? And I said, no. If we can transform business, and because business is the temporal power in the world, we could transform the world. And then this thought popped into my mind, oh, you mean heaven on earth? And Anna, my first thought was, oh my God, you can't say that. And then I thought, well, but why not? Why not? I can speak to you about hell on earth, can I? That's a permissible conversation. But why not our dreams, our deep yearning, our deep longing for the kind of life and work and country and world we want? And I think in terms of humanity's evolution, now's the time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love how with both occasions bringing spirituality into work and then talking about Project Heaven on Earth, both of the time your fear, these roadblocks kind of came up, which was, I can't talk about that.
Major.
Yeah. And you talk about that
Major.
as that being an obstacle, right?
Yes.
That are some of our biggest objectives arise, then our hiding obstacles come with it when we have this big objection. And it's so easy to feel like cut off, like I can't do that, or who am I?
Yes.
And so what were your next steps following that thought of when you became aware of, like, this is what we're talking about, and can I talk about this?
Well, let's go back one more step, which is, I remember the first time I was in Toronto and I heard the phrase vision, okay, in the late 80s. And I was running a management training and consulting and speaking company. And I remember sitting at the dining room table with my wife and 3 or 4 colleagues, friends. And I said, I want to talk about vision. Are you crazy? You can't talk about vision. Everybody will think you're just moved here from California, you're smoking dope, blah, blah, blah. I mean, all of them said no. So what that forced me to do was to look inside, and my inside very clearly said, no, this is what you want right now. And the same thing happened with spirituality and work, which was an even, in those days, larger barrier. You cannot talk about spirituality and work. I mean, you'll lose your reputation, your income, your livelihood. But by the time I got to heaven on earth, like, here we go again. Truly, it was like, but I mean, I did encounter that at the beginning. People would just, their eyes would glaze over when I said heaven on earth, or you could see them just like leave if I was at a party or something, just leave and not come back to me. Well, then that's not true today. Much more willingness to engage and speak about this. So, yeah, I mean, I think for your listeners and viewers, that's a very important thing that I discovered, which is the discrepancy between what your mind says and what your soul and heart and essence, divine essence says. Why you're here. When those, as a bishop friend of mine years ago said, that when those inbreakings come, you got to listen to them. And I mean, your choice is to follow them or not. Absolutely. That's your choice. And so in those 3 major events in my life, I chose to follow them.
So Project Heaven on Earth, let's talk a little bit about what that is.
Well, here, I want to do a little trick with you here.
Okay.
So this is the book, right?
Yeah.
Read the title.
Project Heaven on Earth.
There's another title embedded in that same title. Project Heaven on Earth.
Oh, wow.
So the word project is both a verb, project, and a noun, project. So it's about a state of being that you are emanating heaven on earth, and it's about a state of doing that you're doing this project. So your question was, let's talk about heaven on earth?
Yeah. What is it? And how do you describe it when you're having conversations with people and you say, hey, I'm doing this project Heaven on Earth? It's like, what is that?
And what I say to them is, because in the same way for spirituality and work, that Heaven on Earth, I I feel that if I give you my definition of it, it will. If you agree with me, fine. There's really not a lot to talk about. If you disagree with me, I'm going to lose you. I think it's much more important to, rather than impose a definition of Heaven on Earth on you, is to evoke Heaven on Earth from you. And how I did that when I started this inquiry into Heaven on Earth was I would go, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't. And I'm not a big reader. I'm a big interactor, relationship guy. So I would go to people and say, Anna, what is it for you? Bill, what is it for you? Sam, what is it for you? Susan. And I just kept asking over and over and over. And then that distilled down to these three questions, which form the basis, the beginning of the book, these three simple questions. And I know we talked a little bit about this before we went on air, but I'd love to ask you these three questions and to have your listeners and viewers answer them as well. So willing to play?
Absolutely.
All right, so question one, recall a time when you experienced Heaven on Earth. Recall a time when you experienced Heaven on Earth. What was going on?
Oh, there's so many moments that come to my mind. One time comes to my mind where I was in Hawaii and saw this massive rainbow.
Yep, I'm just writing down. Go ahead.
Another time, sometimes I have these little moments with my son that are kind of like no big deals, but whether he's just like sitting there in his diaper being himself totally, like a moment that could just bring me to tears because he's just so being himself. When I interact and have a kind exchange with another human being. I remember one day I was kind of down and I went to the market and I served an older woman soup, and I felt like I I felt like I was helping her, but she was helping me.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Clear. All right. Second question. Sorry, is that?
Yeah, that's good. I could keep going, but we'll move
Yeah,
on.
that's good. Imagine you have a magic wand. And with this wand, you can have Heaven on Earth. What's Heaven on Earth for you?
Heaven on Earth for me would be kindness in each interaction with people. I sometimes feel like we're so guarded. So letting our guards down, being vulnerable, being honest with one another, truthful, so that we can break down these barriers and that we can facilitate more. I want to say leaning on each other more.
Very clear. Very clear. And then the third question, what simple, easy, concrete step will you take in the next 24 hours to move that forward?
So actionable items.
Just one.
Okay.
Simple. That you
Okay.
know you're going to do.
Well, I think just paying attention more to interactions, but maybe I also want to take it a step further to actually seek out um, a place that I could donate some of my son's old toys to and
Yeah.
give some toys and books that he's no longer using.
Very clear. So let's go through the questions. Recall a time when you experienced Heaven on Earth. What you said was in Hawaii with the rainbow, your son just sitting there, bringing you to tears. I really felt that one. Or some kind exchange like with the woman in the supermarket. What you did, and it was answer my question. What you did not do, and what no one does, you didn't ask Martin, what do you mean by Heaven on Earth? Why didn't you ask that? Why doesn't anyone ask that? Because I assert that you have within you this already knowing about what Heaven on Earth is. And so when the question is asked, you scan your life and you go, Hawaii, my son, the woman. You instantly know Happens all the time, Anna, all the time. Second question, here's a magic wand, and with it you can have heaven on earth. The reason for the magic wand is to remove the necessity of having to know how you're going to do it. And if you don't have to know how, you go like you did, bang, right into the what. Kindness in each interaction with people, vulnerability, honesty, truthfulness, leaning on each other. That is heaven on earth for you. I didn't tell you, you told you. And then the third question, because I want you to take that and action it simply, easily, concretely. I will pay more attention in the next 24 hours, and I will seek out a place to donate the toys and books that my son no longer needs. So you see, we went from you do know what it is, you've had an experience of it, to you do know what it is, to here's what I'm going to do to make it real. And that process of that knowing that you know and discovering what it is for you and then acting, that in the larger context creates the new story of what it means to be a human and what it means to be humanity. That's what we've been longing for, not just a new story, but to name that new story, which is we are experiencing and co-creating heaven on earth. That's what we're now doing, very consciously.
Mm. I gotta tell you what I'm experiencing is I can feel my energy so much more in my body, in my heart, my belly versus in my head.
Yeah.
Because I think we try to intellectualize some of these concepts and we can be overwhelmed kind of almost from a place of like our ego, our thinking mind of like, I can't do that. It's too big or too overwhelming. But when you personalize it like you just did and you help people understand what they already know and act from that place, it's very different experience.
So you see much clearer now the distinction between me trying to impose it on you versus me evoking it from you. And so now my definition of heaven on earth, there's no threat. It can be whatever it is for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the time is so prevalent in our society. Speak from the United States perspective, which, to be totally honest, Martin, I pay very little attention to politics because I try to focus on contributing as much as I can and in ways that I can. And for some people that might be politically, I'm not knocking politics by any means. It's just not where I put a lot of my attention, but a lot of people do. And a lot of differences can arise. Right. So how, like, if one person believes that they're from their soul, that something is right and somebody else believes something else is right, how do you work through that to co-create more of heaven on earth?
Very good. Because I think, especially in the context of the US right now, which is highly polarized from the media point of view, anyway, not us as two American citizens. The notion of polarization and separation means there's nothing I can do, I think, to come together on that. One of the things that I did for many years was I led dialogues for opposing parties. I mean, severely opposing. And what they would come in like this, and then through good dialogue process, they started to go like this. And that space in the middle, that overlap, is what we're talking about here. So part of the roadblock that comes up in a highly polarized time is they are not with me. Dialogue and the expansion of dialogue, particularly in the US, there's an organization called the National Coalition of Dialogue and Deliberation, is coming up with incredible ways of bringing people together. So what it boils down to for me, Anna, is you see this as something that's not working, i.e. the polarization. And rather than saying, okay, that's it, there's nothing I can do, game over, you say, all right, my commitment to heaven on earth is, if this is true for you, my commitment to heaven on earth is bridging that apparent divide and finding the overlap. And when you see that done, it's staggering. It can be done. The myth, it's a myth of separation. I bet it's firmly believed, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. So that brings me to my next question, where you talk about belief.
Yeah.
Where is it here?
Well, what I say is that there's a belief that in order to do something, you have to believe that you can do it.
That's
Is that
right.
what you're referring to? Yeah. So get this language. In order for me to do X, I need to believe that I can do X. So let's suppose I want to do X and I don't believe it's possible. There's two things that I do. One is I wait for the belief to come, and I wait and I wait and I wait and do affirmations, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or I set my goal lower so that belief is not present. That's usually one of the two things that is done. I'm suggesting that, and get this, belief is not necessary to accomplish. The evidence I use is this. Have you or anyone you know done something that they didn't believe is possible for them to do, after which they said, oh my God, I did it, but I don't believe I did it. But they did it. It's because belief isn't necessary. And in the realm, for some people, of heaven on earth, that's so big, that's so impossible, it's so beyond belief, that why would I even begin to address that or engage with that? But I'm saying it's not necessary. Would it be all right for you if there were no hunger in the world and you didn't believe it was possible? Duh, yes. It's not necessary. It's nice if it's there, but it's not necessary.
Yeah.
What's necessary is to do it.
Yeah. So what you're saying here is to take action with, even if you don't believe that it's possible.
I would put one thing before that. I would say make a commitment.
Okay.
So for example, I want to end hunger in the world. I want there to be no hunger, and I don't believe it's possible. Good. My commitment is the end of hunger, and I notice I have a belief that it's not possible. That belief can either stop me and I'll be justified. I can't do it, it's impossible. Or I can say, I'm working, Anna, on ending hunger, and I notice I have a belief that I can't do it. The belief is still present in both situations, but in one there's stoppage, and the other there's action.
Yeah. And you tell a story about your running a marathon that you thought you could run 5 miles.
The most I'd ever run was 5 miles to that point, yes.
And you signed up for a marathon. It
Yep.
doesn't sound like you really trained for it though, Martin. It was like, you can run 5 miles.
It's true. It's true. This is years ago. And I ran with a Jim and my two buddies, Jim and Brian. And they said, okay, let's do it. All right, what big deal. And the most I'd ever run was 5. And I made it to 16. And a weird thing happened. I was still running, but the world wasn't moving. And I looked down and my legs were, I was running from the waist up, but not from the waist down. And to this day, I don't believe that I did it.
Yeah.
And I did it.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I'm learning that because I think there's a lot of messaging, and I'd love to hear your viewpoint in the personal development world that you have to believe it to see it. But that's not always true, is what you're saying here too, is that, somebody didn't run the 4-minute mile before they did.
Correct.
Yeah.
Before they did. And then, do you know that once Roger Bannister did that in the next little while, a bunch of other guys did it?
Yeah.
Because the belief, he not only broke the time limit, he broke the belief that it couldn't be done.
Yeah. So I love this idea that you can still have almost like a negative belief there, but be aware of it.
Yes.
And not let it stop you from the commitments that you've made.
The analogy I use is that the negative belief can either be a brick in a brick wall that stops you, or it can be a brick in the roadway that lets you go forward.
Yeah. What are some of those, you mentioned those conversational pieces. So just practically speaking, let's say, somebody's at a dinner party and they're having a conversation and they start to get into some of that conflict that you mentioned. What are some of those conversational tools? Because I think even if we can start with conversation as a vehicle
A gateway.
to co-create, what are some tools that you use in conversation to help bridge gaps?
Well, in addition to the dialogue that I've done, formal dialogues between opposing parties, let me tell you a very personal one. When my wife and I start to have a fight, every fight that we have, the essence of it is the following: I'm right, you're wrong, and add content. They're always the same. And we've been together long enough now to know, oh, we're having a fight, stop. And we both split and walk into separate rooms. And then 5 minutes later, we come back and we're off our, position, and we're back to loving again. So it's to break that pattern. I've got to convince you, Anna, that you're wrong here. You're wrong. I'm right. That's the only way out. And you play the same game with me. Can never win.
Yeah. So if somebody is in that state, because that's a state of I'm right. And if you're right,
it's more than that. You're wrong, I'm right. It's about both of us. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So if somebody's in that state, is it taking a pause?
Taking a pause. It's breaking the pattern.
Yeah.
Because we're locked into the pattern. It's breaking that and walking away. And one of the bridges here I want to make is that after I asked these 3 questions I just asked you to hundreds of people, I discovered what patterns in the answers. And so the book goes into the rest of those patterns, which are how people think of creating heaven on earth. One of which is through relationship. So if you and I are in a relationship, with a hell on earth relationship, this chapter focuses on what does it take to turn that into a relationship that is a heaven on earth relationship. One of the things is, and I know this is going to sound weird to some people, some people think it's, you're 100% responsible, the other person, for making the relationship work, and it's not working, it's all your fault. Then people say, no, it's 50-50. Then people say it's 100-100. I'm suggesting you think of it as 100% you and 0 for them. Now, at first you say, oh my God, that's nuts. But if you do it that way, then you notice that you are completely and solely responsible for the current condition of the relationship, say a hell on earth one, and the heaven on earth, turning it in. It actually empowers you. So one of the gateways is relationship.
Yeah. So like something like ending suffering, right? Some people might say, well, I'm not responsible for that, but you're saying, yes, bring that into something that you're responsible for.
Well, that's another gateway.
Yeah.
One of the patterns that I noticed is a lot of people talk about ending a particular suffering as their gateway into heaven on earth. So for example, ending hunger, ending war, ending poverty, ending disease, ending abuse of children. That's what I call their keystone suffering, that when that suffering breaks, the other sufferings will go. So, and the other gateways are internal, creating more heaven on earth than here, living a value, harmony, love, joy out into the world, being a spreader of that. Relationships, as we talked about, ending a suffering, making an institution, law, government work, making your nation work. I have a woman in Austria. I was doing a webinar. Her name is Elizabeth, and we were talking about sufferings in the world. And what project are you going to do? And she said, oh, in her Germanic accent, Austria is a heaven on earth nation. And I went, what? Where did you get that from? And she said, well, Martin, it's simple. Which is where I learned the power of the word simple, because for her, simple is having her nation, Austria, be a heaven on earth nation. For others, it's, talking to 2 people a day about heaven on earth, or smiling at 2 people a day. So I never know what heaven on earth is for you. Our job is to help others discover what it is and get into action about it and support them in doing that. So the book goes into the 3 questions, and then we go into each of those 7 gateways in very creative ways, because you can't approach each gateway the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how you also bring how this is a topic that isn't really foreign. I mean, almost all religions talk about this in some way, shape, or form.
Yes. And and deep spiritual practices. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
No, it's not a new topic. The first time was in, I think, the 1600s with Milton's book, Paradise Lost. The phrase heaven on earth is not in the Bible. that phrase isn't. He was the first one to use it. And one of the chapters in the book is, I think I have 14 faith traditions talking about what they see as heaven on earth. So yes, it's been around, and it's now coming to the fore.
Why do you feel called to this mission?
So it brings tears to my eyes a little bit. When I heard the phrase, as I mentioned it to you in that story, about being ready to speak about spirituality work, and the thought popping into my mind, heaven on earth, it was like, that's it. I knew. I mean, I knew. I knew. There's no other way to explain it. Even, and at the beginning, I was scared. What did people think? And I saw people think I'm crazy, even to this day. But I also see how it's changing. And you and I, before we just went on the air here, I'll ask your viewers to do this. Go onto Google, put in the phrase, in quotes, heaven on earth. So quote, heaven on earth, quote, and then the number 2018. You'll get about anywhere from 8 to 10 million results. Not on all mine, of course, but others as well. And then here we are doing this around halfway through this 2019, and it's already up to 13.7 as of this morning. So we're up about 145%, and over the entirety of last year, and we're not even halfway through this year. So, Anna, something's happening here. It's arising underneath, popular culture at the moment, but it will come more into popular culture.
How has, since this thought popped into your head about this project, how has your life changed?
Well, this.
How long did it take you to write the book?
I'm embarrassed to tell you this. Wow, 25 years.
Okay.
Because I had to really get clear on stuff before I could write.
I think that's so helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, good. Thank you. The first person who said that. I think the assumption underneath
it might take me 25 years to write a book, so I appreciate that.
Well, I think, thank you. You just pointed out an assumption I have. I thought I should write a book in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, me too.
Doesn't everybody else do it in 5 minutes? That's what it took me to do it. And it was very tough at times. And I had some tremendous support from people.
What do you mean it was tough?
I hate writing.
Me too, Martin.
I like the result.
Yeah.
And I had this guy working with me, David Crystal, as a coach. And, sometimes we would write a paragraph and it would take me like 17, I'm exaggerating, but 17 years to write one paragraph. And the next day we'd write like 3 pages in 2 seconds. And there was no rhyme or reason. It's just, and what the other thing about writing, which I love, is you can't cheat. You either wrote today or you didn't write today, black or white. That's it. And then I have this wonderful video that I made of me actually opening my book, the first proof copy. And the look, I'm still stunned to see that. It's an amazing experience. This book says what I want to say to the world. That's it.
Yeah. And it's a big book, Martin. So it didn't seem like it was like an overnight thing. Plus, you have a lot of experience and this was developing. It didn't just happen. It's something that developed, and you can feel that reading this book, because that's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you that question, because it didn't seem like it was something that was overnight. You did a lot of research. You've had a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And then it just seems like also a lot of looking at yourself as well.
I really had to confront myself in the writing process, because, as I said, you can't cheat in writing. You either do or don't. You can think about writing and blah, blah, blah. And I remember my cousin said, at least you're something like, if you're not writing at least 2 hours a day, you have no idea what writing is. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you did it.
I did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And honest, this is the truth. I still don't believe I did. That thought is still there. I have this physicality in my life, and I still don't believe I did it. That's true.
And you said you don't like writing, and you wrote a book, so you don't have to like it either.
Very good. Ooh, Anna, you're good. That's true.
Yeah. I mean, I think
That's,
that's important because there's so much emphasis also on passion. And clearly you have passion, but it's not necessarily the, what gives creating the engine to that passion. A lot of the times it's doing things that we don't, I'm going to speak from my own experience, that I don't like, that I don't
yeah,
think I'm very good at. And
yeah.
there's a lot of frustration around that because I feel this passion that I want to just be able to release, but I have to actually do the work to
That's
get
a
there.
beautifully said. You have to do the work. I mean, there's this thing that, it's very easy. Everybody who writes a book writes it so easily, but not me. Uh, and the hard work of it is, there's a maturation process that comes about, and a clarification. I can speak with greater clarity, because I would come to somebody and go, I want to talk about heaven on earth for nations, right? And they go, what? No, it's impossible. And I had to go away and like think about it, and I'd come back and try it out. How about this? No, go away, come back. How about this? Yeah, yeah. Okay, go back. How about this? Oh, okay, I get it. So it was always about getting to the point where I would just say it once and you would get it. Then I knew I had it.
Mm. What were you like how would you describe your younger self?
To a large extent, the same as this self.
How so?
Well, I was a kid who loved to play. I mean, that's a very important word to me. I actually read a book by Peter Kreeft, I think his name is. He's a Dutch philosopher in Boston, and he wrote a book about heaven. And one of the ways he said, that heaven exists here now, is through values like love and beauty, wisdom. And then he said, and play. And I never heard anyone lump play with those other kinds of deeper values. But that, to me, is my wife says, when I'm around children, I just go nuts, because we play, and there's permission to play. So I knew as a kid I was here to change the world. That was very clear to me. I have no reason to, like, where did that come from? Inside. And play. Those are two very, very important things for me.
Yeah, beautiful. How do you play?
This, doing art, I do a form of art, of printmaking called a monotype. I love playing with children. I love playing with my wife. I mean, when she cracks me up with a joke or something, and we just, wander around linguistically, or with my cousins. The cousin visited here recently, and it's just, I mean, we're dying laughing. Is that kind of quick Jewish humor that I love, that, is not present where I am right today. But that kind of, and I've been watching a lot of, I've been watching, interesting, I've been watching a lot of Martin Short. I've been
Hmm.
watching a lot of Jerry Lewis. I'm fascinated by comedy, the brilliant ones
Yeah, I love comedy too.
that they're playing. And comedy is, so transformation, comedy, and magic. I love all three. They all, underneath, have the same premise, which is there is a belief that they present. And once they know that you have that belief or engage with it, then they can step outside of it.
Hmm. Yeah, I also love the truth in comedy, that they kind of bring forth these things that people don't say,
Yeah.
and they can say it in a way because they package it in a way that's funny.
Jackie Mason does that brilliantly, and Dave Chappelle.
Hmm. Yeah. Lately, I've been watching Sebastian. I don't know how to say his last name,
Oh,
Montesolo, but
I don't know.
I'm going to send you a video, Martin, because he's really funny.
I have a list. I have a list of my comedy favorites.
Okay.
Who's
Okay.
on First? Slow Talkers of America. Dave
What?
Chappelle. Clayton Bigsby. I mean, it was genius.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
I mean, I can't think of particular words, but it's something like, follow your passion, follow what's true for you. Um, and conversely, when people say, no, you can't do that. I love when people say you can't do that, and when it forces me to look and see if my truth is still my truth. That's the function they're playing.
Powerful. So you're saying check in with yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think so many people just take what other people say and they're like, okay, you know. Um, I want to read directly from your book. You say, imagine our world as more and more people live from this perspective. More and more people taking on their heart's desires in spite of not believing they can achieve them, rather than sitting around waiting to believe they can. How different would our world be? Wouldn't we be well on our way to co creating heaven on earth? I just thought that was so beautiful.
Still gets me.
Yeah, it's
I mean, it's
very
interesting to
powerful.
hear somebody read it. I don't think I've heard anyone read it back to me. So thank you, because I listen to it and I go, wow, that's really good. I have no idea that I wrote that.
Yeah, I want to repeat it again, is that
Yeah.
people taking on their heart's desires in spite of not believing they can achieve them, rather than sitting around waiting to believe they can. How different would our world be? Wouldn't we be well on our way to co-creating heaven on earth?
That's really powerful for me. Very powerful.
Yeah. Any final words that you want to share, Martin?
Well, just you. This has been a remarkable interview. You are very, very good. And I say that because I look at how I am in the interview, and you've brought forth a depth and a clarity in me that's very rare in interviews. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Quite a compliment, Martin.
Thank you. Uh, yeah, I would ask people if this resonates, buy the book, Project Heaven on Earth. It's on Amazon. Um, and one of the, you can also sign up for my free 7-day course on projectheavenonearth.com. All the stuff's on there. There's a projectheavenonearth.com video channel on YouTube as well. And let me know. Um, let me know how this moves you, and more importantly, how you have engaged with this. My contact information is on projectheavenonearth.com. And one other thing I want to say, I've invented this new thing called the case for heaven on earth. If people buy 20 or more books one time and send me the receipt at Martin at Project Heaven, or you can see the contact information on the website. I'll do a free 1-hour video webinar for you and your group.
Oh, fantastic.
So we've started doing that. It's amazing.
That's
Amazing.
great. That's great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your message, and so powerful the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, man.